Pour écouter cette session en français, veuillez cliquer en bas de votre écran sur l'onglet Interprétation et sélectionner le drapeau français.
Hello.
Bonjour.
Habari za leo.
On behalf of ICLEI Africa, the Africa Centre for Cities, Our Future Cities,
Surge Africa and the Red Cross Crescent Climate Centre,
We are delighted to welcome you to the Rise Africa 2023 Action Festival.
Rise Africa is a platform that brings together thinkers, doers, and enablers
to inspire action for sustainable cities.
This is the third edition of our virtual festival.
it brings together insights, practices, and visions from across the continent.
This year's theme is The Cities We Want.
the cities we want.
the cities we want.
The cities we want.
This mirrors the African Union 2063 Agenda vision, the Africa we want.
It is a wonderful Pan-African call for transformative change.
However, the agenda does not adequately embrace urbanization as a potential positive force for improving prosperity, inclusivity, and environmental well-being on the continent.
We need more emphasis on the role of cities and local action. And this festival aims to provide inputs into this agenda.
The cities we have are
Expanding,
incomplete,
inventive,
contested,
facing impending crisis, yet brimming with potential.
The cities we want are
people-centered,
Safe and healthy.
beacons of culture,
unflinchingly modern.
And adapting to change and leading global innovation.
We'll make these cities through
Experimenting,
learning
collaborating,
and amplifying the everyday actions of people who are shaping their cities.
The festival invites you to embrace different ways of knowing,
It invites you to forge new partnerships,
Experiment with new concepts and ideas.
to seek ways to bridge science, business, policy, and the arts.
Together, let's enter this space in the spirit of poetic possibilities.
À l'encre de mon sang, au papier de ma langue, à mes yeux qui tanguent lentement dans le vide, rêvant un jour de laisser des traces de regard sur les villes que nous voulons et imaginons au-delà des vers. Entre deux effluves, mon être crie utopie, mon cœur murmure héritage. Mon âme, elle, chante avenir. De villes riches de leur multiplicité, multiples dans leur diversité, unique pluralité niée hier s'est avancée vers un demain déjà avorté. Enracinement certes, mais ouverture dans ce village planétaire, laisser les sens alertes et réagir. Entendre la cacophonie banalisée des inégalités sociétales criardes laissées en fond sonore, voir et questionner le décor, bâtir et consentir à l'action qui sépare le rêve de la réalité. Sentir la fragrance vitale, belle et verte, inévitable baume au cœur, accepter notre responsabilité de léguer à nos enfants un monde en bonne santé. Démocratiser le goût, que plus aucun palais, d'aucune bouche, d'aucun enfant, d'aucun pays ne soit plus jamais sec. Démocratiser le goût des rêves, des voyages qui s'exécutent quel que soit l'âge, le long des pages, au fil des chapitres, sur le pupitre de la connaissance, seul germe du choix. Toucher l'idée d'infrastructure qui marche allègrement sur le chemin de l'innovation. Enracinement certes, mais ouverture dans ce village planétaire. Laisser les sens alertes, mais surtout réagir.
Welcome, everybody. Good afternoon. It is an absolute pleasure to be spending some time with you today. My name is Ursula Wellman, and I'll be kind of guiding today's session with the colleagues I will be introducing in a short while. I think before we get to that point, though, I mean, as is typical, we will first tackle a little bit of housekeeping rules. But firstly, just to kind of explain what we're doing today. So as you'll see up on the screen today, we are chatting about hope spots and really reimagining them. I mean, what do new visions for community action and urban change in coastal cities look like? And I think, I mean, looking at that idea, you know, and kind of embracing today as Africa Day, you know, 60 years after the African Union was established, I think it's a wonderful opportunity, you know, to kind of dive into that topic and obviously hear from the colleagues, experts all in their own right, and obviously kind of share in these experiences and the best practices that they bring. So I think then just for procedural perspectives, let's quickly get into our housekeeping rules and then just kind of have a look in terms of the do's and the don'ts. So yes, as I said, I am Ursula Wellman, Manager Biodiversity and Nature at ICLEI Africa. And seeing that this is a session on Zoom, we just want to kindly ask that everybody please keep their microphones on mute and also videos off unless you may be wanting to ask a specific question. We've asked our presenters to keep theirs on, and please also note that our sessions are being recorded. This video, I mean, or rather this session will also be available afterwards on our website. So by participating, you also give consent to be recorded. We have a chat box available for obviously the session. You're welcome to pop a question into there to the speakers. If a question is addressed to a specific speaker, please just put the name, obviously include that. And then, yes, as we'll also kind of be using the chat box for introducing our speakers, welcome to also keep an eye on the chat box there. And then lastly, you're also welcome to just kind of use any of our social media handles, which you'll see there as Rise Africa 2023. So I think then let's delve into our session by firstly, just kind of showing you what we have in store for you. So from here, we'll go into the welcome, and then we'll kick it off in terms of where this whole kind of concept and everything began. Then we'll also look at the concept from the Sustainable Seas Trust perspective. And then also look at, you know, kind of closer to home, I mean, if you're in Cape Town, that is, the Overstrand experience in terms of the Cape Whale coast. And then from there, we'll go into a panel discussion. There'll be an opportunity to ask questions, so please keep an eye on the kind of chat box, and also please just add any questions for the speakers in there. And then it wouldn't be, you know, a session without the inclusion of youth. I mean, definitely not a session that looks at, you know, the African agenda, you know, in terms of the 2063 agenda that the African Union is obviously looking towards. I mean, youth are integral to our future, and obviously have such a critical voice, and with we'll include obviously that perspective, and then from there go to concluding remarks. So I think without further ado, let's look at the purpose of our session and also welcome and introduce our speakers. So today I'm joined by Dr. Stacey Webb. She's the Executive Director for the Sustainable Seas Trust. And then we're also joined by Ms. Liesel de Villiers. She is the Senior Manager of the Environmental Management Services of the Overstrand Municipality. Then also joined by Mr. Pierre de Villiers. I did see he's running a tad late, but hopefully we'll make it by then. He is the Senior Manager Marine and Coasts for Cape Nature. And then we'll also be joined by Dr. Rajan Chedambat. He is just, so, and then we also have, sorry, just a second. So then we also have Kim, the shark lady, as she is very fondly called, Kim McLean from Shark Lady Adventures. And then also sharing the youth perspective afterwards, we have Zinya Bunyula, who's the Director of Projects in South Africa for Youth in Your Oceans. Okay, so with I think a wonderful group of panelists who will share their perspectives a bit later. Just want to actually quickly highlight why we're even here today. So just in terms of hope spots. I mean, some of you might not know, or some of you definitely will know a lot more of them, but the concept was essentially born in 2009, really looking to mobilize action for special marine areas that are critical, to the health of our oceans. So hope spots really aim to maintain biodiversity. In doing so, they provide carbon sinks and then generate life-giving oxygen. So all of these activities, kind of also contributes to ecotourism and obviously also biodiversity to thrive. The brand itself kind of aims to ignite and unify public support. So it's really with this vision that hope spots have been created all around the world. And they are specifically championed by Mission Blue. And I think what better way for Mission Blue to kind of speak of that. And I think for that, we've got a short little video explaining the concept a bit better.
I see things that others do not. A different world. The world that's changed enormously just in my lifetime. My backyard was the Gulf of Mexico. That's where I first fell in love with the ocean. I think if others had the opportunity to witness what I have seen in my lifetime from thousands of hours underwater, I would not seem like a radical at all.
It's a pleasure to introduce a scientist, an engineer, a teacher, and an explorer.
The ocean is dying. All of us, we are the beneficiaries of having burned through fossil fuels. But at what cost? 60 years ago, when I began exploring the ocean, no one imagined that we could do anything to harm it. I saw the after influence of what we can do to the natural world. Think of the world without an ocean. You've got a planet a lot like Mars. No ocean, no life. No ocean, no us.
In 1990, she became the chief scientist for NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration.
I went to one meeting, and I was never allowed to go again. I feel that I must resign and, as a private citizen, do what I can do with more freedom.
She's not afraid to say, you know what you're doing and it's wrong.
I really speak for the ocean. If we continue business as usual, we're in real trouble.
She's made it her life's purpose to make sure everybody else understands what's going on.
Sylvia has a wish for the planet, what she calls her Mission Blue. Protect the ocean in the same way we now protect the land.
I wish for a global network of marine protected areas to save and restore the ocean.
Great. I think thanks for sharing that video. I think that was a wonderful example of just setting the scene, and that passion, seeing that passion demonstrated. I mean, undoubtedly, that is, I think, also, what drives each and every one of us in what we do, and also our speakers in supporting this. And I think this is also how we want to see how hope spots can inspire action in Africa and beyond, to support positive social and environmental and economic transformations, really. So I think now is a great opportunity to hand over to Dr. Stacey Webb, who will share with us a little bit more about the hope spots concept and also its vision, specifically from the perspective of Sustainable Seas Trust. So over to you, Dr. Webb.
Thank you so much, and thank you for inviting us today to join in this discussion. Can everyone hear me?
Perfect, 100%.
I've clicked full screen. Can everyone see full screen?
And you full screen.
Perfect, thank you so much. So for those of you who don't know, Sustainable Seas Trust is an organization, an NPO, and our vision is a future where the people of Africa and overseas flourish together. And our mandate is to work in all 54 continental and island states of Africa. We do this through collaboration. No one organization can make a change on their own. And we collaborate through other bodies, other international bodies like the Abidjan Convention, Nairobi Convention, etc. Our mandate at the moment relates mainly to plastic waste, and that is because internationally, a lot of people don't know what to do about climate change, for example. But when you talk about plastics, it's a very legitimate issue that people can actually assist with. And obviously, plastics relates to climate change in their own way. So it's often, and when you talk about climate change, people think it's this big issue they can't assist. But when you focus down on some of the smaller things that lead into climate change, there are smaller things that they can assist. So globally, the approach towards climate change has changed in the last few years. But for the last 5 years, we've been focusing on plastics and their contribution. And UNIA and other organizations are calling for countries to commit to reducing plastic going into the environment. Right now or next week, there is discussions in France. So countries are going to these treaty negotiations. They are committing to targets. They're committing to reduce their plastics, but they don't actually know what to do to get there. So SST's role has become to develop guides towards developing action plans. And we've also started to assist countries with drafting their national action plans. That's just a little bit more about us and our broader work. And I'm going to tell you now a little bit about where HopeSpots fit in. So back in 2014, our founder, Dr. Tony Ribbink, was approached by Mission Blue to initiate the development of South African HopeSpots. And at the time, HopeSpots were a little bit more protected, similarly to an MPA in general over the world. So South Africa's HopeSpots, when SST broached the idea, was to be community-based HopeSpots. And they were developed as the first 6 community-based HopeSpots in the world. So they are very unique. They're all amazing areas. SST's role at the time was to coordinate the launch, identification and the launch of these HopeSpots. And then there was champions that were identified at each of the HopeSpots. And those champions then, SST's capacity then was reduced, and we haven't been able to be on the ground at all the HopeSpots. So those champions were taking responsibility for continuation of the HopeSpots. Into the future, SST itself we've just redeveloped our strategic plan, and part of the concern with developing action plans is where you need to focus. So the plan going forward will be to take where the HopeSpots are in Africa, overlay it with MPAs and other protected areas, overlay that with rivers and estuaries and flows going into the ocean, and then overlaid with some of the prominent African cities to identify where the priority cities need to be in Africa, because we know that the issues around waste, around sustainability of the ocean are not going away. Africa's population is set to double in the next few years, which means that our urbanization rate is increasing. So we really need to start focusing on making our cities more sustainable in order to be able to mitigate some of the effects of our population growing and the increase in urbanization. So because of SST's capacity, our focus for the last 5 years has been on Algoa Bay HopeSpot, and I'm really looking forward to hearing some of the other speakers and how much work has happened in some of the other HopeSpots today. In terms of Algoa Bay HopeSpot, since we're a science-based organization, we focused on developing research, understanding our stakeholders, understanding litter loads within the environment, what the issues are that are affecting sustainability in the area, and then developing the resources to engage with communities around these issues. So we've developed curriculum-aligned resources for schools. We've developed training programs for SMMEs. And we've also trialed community awareness initiatives in partnership with our other stakeholders. So these initiatives and the education initiatives that we have launched, we've obviously had learnings over the last 5 years. And in 2021, we trialed a new program called Operations Clean Spot, with a simple premise that to clean up the world, you have to start in one spot. And if each person was to take responsibility for their immediate area where they live, work, and play, then we would land up with a reduction in litter. Litter is a massive problem in Nelson Mandela Bay. I'm sure where all of you are, it is as well. And it's not an uncommon issue throughout Africa as well. One of the main ways in which Algoa Bay Hope Spot has been run is through community collaboration. So initially, when the Hope Spot was launched, our local champion was Dr. Lorian Pishigru. She's continued to do an amazing job with communications to the public through the Algoa Bay Hope Spot platform. In addition, she's partnered with WESA and Bayworld, and she initiates monthly community talks, which hope to reach the public here in Nelson Mandela Bay. We've also developed a committee called the Algoa Bay Ocean Stewards, which is comprised of multiple different community organizations. You can see a list on the right-hand side there. They are different community members, even individuals in their own capacity. We have obviously the chairs and vice chairs to run the committee, but through this committee, we've been able to unite and activate the existing networks through these organizations to target issues that happen within Algoa Bay. Some of the successes that we've had is, I mean, it's an ongoing battle with seismic surveys, but we have had a lot of success in trying to stop seismic surveys on this side of the coast. There is actually a new application in, so we will be this Saturday gathering to give a hoot for seismic surveys. And we've also initiated community cleanups. Obviously, cleanups are not sustainable and we need to stop waste at the source. So in partnership with the Business Chamber, we are looking at developing area action plans on a local scale, which will hopefully result in design principles that we can then roll out to other areas and other people can use to target waste in their areas. Through the Business Chamber, there's been another community collaboration that has come about called Resurgence. This collaboration is currently focused on waste, but the aim of this collaboration is actually to get Nelson Mandela Bay working again. A lot of the issues in our cities is because the current processes within the city and the municipality don't quite work as a well-oiled machine. So by including businesses and other organizations that are concerned who want to assist, hopefully we can get the city's systems working again. And interestingly enough, the first task of this, let's call it a campaign, is to reduce waste. And businesses are actually coming on board and adopting spots to clean up through our program Operation Clean Spot. So in summary, the lessons that we've learned here in Algoa Bay, committees promote community buy-in. We can't do it without community buy-in, and that is the whole premise behind Hope Spots, is that they are community-based conservation areas, that the community themselves can have an input, that they can also use the resources within those areas, and that they're reliant on those resources. For businesses, obviously, money talks. When we're talking about the local economy of any city, focusing on the issues that affect the economy is something that businesses are concerned about. So when they have an investor coming to visit Nelson Mandela Bay, if he is driven through an extremely dirty area and he decides to pull his investment, that obviously affects the businesses locally. So talking about local economy and how cleaning up, how reducing waste going into the environment can improve the local economy, that gets businesses on board. And then, of course, working with existing organizations on the ground. There are so many organizations that are doing amazing work. No one organization can do everything. In essence, collaboration is the key. So by joining hands, hopefully we can use the hope spots and the hope that is created around hope spots to mobilize the communities to assist with the conservation of these areas. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Stacey. I think this was a wonderful kind of presentation, and really highlighting, as your last slide speaks of collaboration. I mean, I think this is really also what we're wanting to see, how hope spots can navigate the challenges, associated with sustaining these collaborative partnerships. And I mean, obviously, for any type of community-based initiative, really, and, the important touch points around waste, which you highlighted, I mean, and the impacts, of course, on biodiversity, and I mean, with obviously climate change. I mean, there we have our 3 global crises, and how your program offers such a very tangible solution. And I love how you've managed to also get in the big businesses, or the businesses in the area, on board, and obviously also kind of making it a community initiative. So I think, thank you for sharing those insights with us. And from there, I'd like to come to the Overstrand region. There is the Cape Whale Coast Hope Spot, and that it's one of the hope spots which we saw obviously in South Africa. And there we'll have Ms. Liesel de Villiers, who we said is the Senior Manager for Environmental Management Services at the Overstrand Municipality. Will take us through a little bit of the experience the municipality had. I mean, I think if I recall a conversation not too long ago, Liesel, the establishment of the Hope Spot, was initiated in some part by the municipality. Take us through that a little bit, please. Like, what was Overstrand's experience and has been since, the Hope Spot's been established?
Thank you, Ursula. Yes, good morning, everybody. The Overstrand Municipality was approached by SST in 2014 to initiate the Cape Whale Coast Hope Spot, and it was quite a huge task for us to get everything together for the launch in December 2014. And it was a huge concept for us to also, if you can use the word, sell to the community and to our partners that we needed to involve into the process, and to the larger organization, Overstrand organization, so that they could understand the importance of what this Hope Spot would mean to our larger community. But I think once that concept was understood, the importance that the conservation of not only our terrestrial landscape, but the importance of the conservation that role played regarding the conservation of our marine landscape as well, what role that played for the sustainable resource utilization of the broader community, and the tourism that brought also huge tourism potential that brought to the Overstrand community. Once that was understood, it was well supported. I think also from our Overstrand point of view, Overstrand municipality point of view, the Overstrand urban areas are sandwiched between the mountain and the sea. And that's the only sections that we have to basically develop. And that needs to be done extremely sustainably, very sensitively. And therefore, in Dr. Sylvia's own words, she said that there's no green without blue. And we, from that, understood that what else is important for the Overstrand municipality to do is also to look at the proper conservation and protection of what enters our seas. And that means that those mountains, that is our catchment areas, of our rivers that goes into our estuaries, that are those important feeding sources of our coastline, that keeps that biodiversity going. That are also the areas that we need to protect. So we also invest into the catchment to coast protection of our areas, but Pia is going to talk more about that and talk about what we envisage regarding our hope spots. But I think the most important thing is that we've got an amazing group of supporters, role players, and partners. And Kim, or Shark Lady, as you said, we affectionately call her, will talk on that side. And of course, Kim has been one of our strongest partners in our hope spot. But yeah, I'm going to hand over to Pia, if that's all right. And I think you're going to introduce him. I'm going to leave that to you. Thanks, Ursula.
Thank you very much, Liesl. Yes, so here, as a co-pioneer really also of the Hope Spot, I think, you know, just what he has done and already kind of working in support of the project. I mean, you are the senior manager for the marine and coasts for Cape Nature, and obviously it would be great to also have your perspective, as Liesl has said, on the experience.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry for being late. We were doing anti-poaching operation preparations and it just got out of hand. So thanks for allowing me or giving me the opportunity to have a chat on this in this workshop. Yeah, from a Cape Nature perspective, conservation perspective, we obviously really support the idea. I think Stacey in her presentation referred to collaboration. In the presentation I sent through to you, I think every second word was partnerships. It's critical. And what the Hope Spot does, and I think that's what a strong point is, what its strong point is, it's a good sales product. That clip you showed earlier is amazingly emotional and it gets buy-in. And then it's a platform where you bring people in. And what we did over many years now is cement partnerships, identify people that can contribute, enhance their passion, because I think also what's in Stacey's presentation, or what's missing but needs to be read between the lines, is the passion that's driving it, the champion. Without that, you're nowhere. We've gone quiet for a while now, and that's why we decided to really step up our game again. It was about identifying a champion, getting motivated people together again, and really making things happen. I know everyone blames COVID, but it did have a lot to do with it. And Cape Nature had a bit of restructuring, so we went through a quiet period. But most of the projects, interestingly enough, set up around 2014 to 16, 17. Most of them are still going, and that shows you the soundness of the products that were developed through this platform. So yeah, I think it's an amazing opportunity, and it's a global platform. So when people link to Hope Spots, they're not looking at just a spot in Africa. It's different spots all over the world, and then overlaying them over marine protected areas. Yeah, that kind of thing is the way to go, because a marine protected area on its own doesn't cover the corridors or the zones of influence between the marine protected areas, which the Hope Spot can do. And that's how it's really had an impact in the Overstrand, because we've got a few small marine protected areas, but the Hope Spot actually helps us cover and develop best practice between the areas. Yeah,
so
in a nutshell.
I mean, and that's a wonderful, great summary. I mean, you've just mentioned the presentation you shared. I mean, is this a presentation we can bring up for you? And obviously we can kind of speak through that. Okay, all right, so our technical team is just going to get that up for you. But I think you've already shared such great insights. I mean, again, speaking to the passion that it needs. And I know we often, COVID often used as an excuse, but, you know, we're kind of beyond this now. And I think the passion needs to be relived, and we need to say, well, where are we going from? And how can, you know, the pre-COVID life and passion obviously kind of continue with the learnings. I guess we wouldn't be holding as many webinars or online engagements, you know, if it wasn't for those experiences. But I think, again, I mean, we've brought up the slides. Can you see them on your side? And then you're welcome to obviously speak to those.
Okay, great. Yeah. So my presentation will just quickly go through who we are, and you've heard quite a lot about it already. Where did the initiative come from? You've heard that. Where are the hope spots I'll just show a quick one. What is needed? I think that's going to be critical. I've got 1 or 2 slides on that, and I'd like to spend time on that and then the way forward. Okay. Bongiwe, okay, that's who we are. That just quickly, that we spent a lot of time, funny enough, on that logo. That's a whale. Sorry, Bongile, can we go back to that first one? I just wanted to, I realized now there's quite a lot of relevance just in that. Can we go back? To that second slide.
Okay, so I'm trying to do that now.
Okay, cool.
Sorry.
So basically, we are whale area, whale hotspot, whale watching. The whales migrate through here from June to October. So that's the whale. That's the obvious one. And then the blue curl is actually, it represents the sea, but it's actually a perlemoen shell. We've got a massive perlemoen fishery, quite illegal going at the moment. And that's where the anti-poaching operation came in. But that's the relevance. And then the swell and the sand dunes. But the big thing here is the area where we go from Roy Else to Quinn Point, which is the Overstrand area, but it covers a lot of the zones of influence between the marine protected areas. So that's the relevance of this thing. Thank you, Bongiwe. Okay, you've heard this quote, no water, no life, no blue, no green. Liesel mentioned it. And it's pretty much how we sold it as well. It really became very relevant to everyone when they started understanding the relevance, other than to catch fish, of this big blue ocean offshore of us. So it's a few words, but they were vital words. Okay. Okay, you know, Sylvia Earle, that's where it all came from. Her mission, the Earth's Blue Heart. You've seen the clip, so I don't have to spend time on that. Thank you. What I'd like to, what's important here, of all of that, because you've heard a lot of this in the discussion already, is the highlighted part of what can happen, or what the Hope Spot provides and the ocean provides, if managed properly, is provision of food, ecotourism. But what's vital that we've added to that is the biodiversity economy. And I'll talk a bit about that later. The citizens in this area are intimately connected to the sea. So marketing this Hope Spot was actually, once we explained that the health of the sea is the health of the people, most of the Overstrand, they either fish, dive, or just look at the sea to relax, started supporting it very quickly. What we've, and I think Stacey mentioned that as well, is we've all been part of the sea, but stakeholders haven't really been involved in decision making. And that's what we really pushed, excuse me, as part of the Hope Spot, is that everyone's included in the decision making. So there were a lot of stakeholder meetings in the decision making and planning for the Hope Spot and the events. Thank you. As partners. Okay, Bongiwe. So this is the one of the critical slides. In a Hope Spot, what we believed and still believe is you have to create hope. It doesn't help having a spot and you launch it and you get guests and it's all amazing, but nothing really changes for the people. So what we proposed as part of it, understanding that good decisions are based on good science, is the Marine Hub. At that time, Cape Nature had a hub at Stony Point already with interns. But the aim of the hub, and it still is, it's not up yet, unfortunately, but we're working towards it, is creating new careers in the marine field, marine science field. We've got examples of what we've done with WWF. We've got a partnership with CPUT, Marine Science. We actually helped create the marine science degree. And we've got a partnership with Fish Force and Nelson Mandela University. And we're looking at career pathing of young people in the biodiversity economy. So we're career pathing them in conservation, in management, in monitoring, in science, and ecotourism for that matter. But the focus is not you have to catch fish to benefit from the sea. And then we set up a lot of partnerships in those early days, and they're still going. We've got a very effective stranding network for reacting to whales, penguins, marine birds, etc. We've developed a really strong partnership with the Island Conservation Trust for marine bird rehab. The biodiversity economy I spoke about. We've got a WWF project at Kleinmond where we're focusing on the youth and training them up and getting them ready for a career in conservation so that they're not only dependent on catching fish as their families have been. The South African Shark Conservancy is a local NGO as well that's helping us with the science, and we've actually got some of the, let's call them ex-poachers. We're using their vessels and we're employing them to assist us with deploying baited remote underwater video equipment after being trained. So it's an amazing change, and that's pushing the whole hope side of things. On the Edge restaurant at Betty's Bay at Stony Point, it's a Cape Nature project where local communities from Moyaitsuk have set up a trust and they're managing a restaurant at Stony Point. The idea, once again, came out of all of this partnershiping we were doing. And in Stacey's presentation and Liesel, we spoke about the importance of economics. In Hermanus, it's a summer town, and we flooded with guests in summertime, but in winter, it goes very quiet. So working with the business chamber and some really motivated people, and they've carried on with it. We've set up Hermanus Extreme Sports. That's an event in May to start getting people into the area outside of peak season so that the economy can carry on. There's Hermanus Varsity Trust, the Whale Festival, this amazing marketing platform, etc., and I can go on. But those are all of the partnerships that came out and new things that were created to show that there is hope to people that participated. Okay, thank you, Bongiwe. And this is just a design or a dream of a marine hub. One day we aim to get there. At the moment, Kim has offered her site in the harbor because you do need, we've tried to keep things going as a bunch of, well, as a group of individuals working together. We've got very strong working kind of ethics and support each other, but you do need to take it the next step is some kind of central hub where we can bring students in to get us the science upon which we can base our decisions, as well as setting up little shops, economy, etc. I don't have to go into all of that, but that's our dream at this site and possibly in Plet as well. Okay, Bongiwe. The way forward, as you've seen throughout the presentation, you've heard the general discussions. This cannot be achieved alone by any one unit, one person, one NGO. We have to work together. South Africa is under huge stress at the moment, and partnerships are the only solution, in my opinion. We work on each other's strengths, and we build a very strong way forward. I think case studies speak louder than theory. I think it's really critical. I mentioned some. There must be passion, there must be drive, and you must get projects going that show people what, for instance, the biodiversity economy is all about. Otherwise, it's nice noise and it's using the right terminology. But in actual fact, employing 15 young people, getting them ready for employment as conservators, but on site, it says a lot more to the local communities and everyone else than putting a theory out there. So projects are critical. It's a driven process. We've got a dynamic team and we're going to step up our game now. Energy and passion is critical. It's a 24/7 job, it's not really a job. It's just something you're passionate about. And you've got to have a make it happen approach. It's not going to happen for you. You've got to create something out of nothing. So these are the this is the philosophy behind what making HopeSpot work. What is behind making HopeSpot work. I think, yeah, I've said enough about that. So thank you.
Well, no, thank you, Pierre. I think it's, I mean, you've already touched on so many relevant points and you know, kind of always coming back again to collaboration and partnerships. I mean,
yeah.
You know, nobody's going to walk this, you know, path alone. And I think that's the testament of how, you know, to kind of look at these conservation kind of projects, it is critical to have, you know, the communities buy-in. You know, you need such a range of stakeholders and business. I mean, I think Stacey touched on that, you know, already in terms of the very relevant, you know, role that business plays in Algoa Bay. And I think in Hermanus, Kim, I've understood obviously that, you know, yours is a similar experience. I mean, you are today here, you know, representing the kind of business sector in a very specific, you know, role. And I mean, already, you know, seeing a reflection of your potential commitment, you know, allowing your space or giving of your space, you know, to let that dream for the area become alive. I think that already speaks, you know, again to the passion that you bring for the project. But if you can, I mean, give a little bit more insights as to, you know, what does it feel like as a private or business sector, you know, representative, you know, when it comes to leveraging the likes of a, you know, HopeSpot. I mean, in your case, obviously the Cape Whale Coast HopeSpot. I mean, what did it actually mean? You know, did it help to enhance economic development or maybe the marine conservation of the area? I mean, what was your take?
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Ursula and your team and Rise Africa for giving me an opportunity, and Liesel and everybody else. Thank you. It's an honor. I find myself in a very fortunate situation where I think is a problem with most people. I'm in a situation where I love my career. I have a business in marine, but it allows me to keep my cup full, which means it can overflow and I can then give back to situations like the HopeSpot. You know, you'll get a lot of people that are really, really keen and want to be involved, but they, you know, money's a problem, then transport's a problem, and so on. So I just want to say that in, you know, a business sector in the marine does help a lot to be able to, as I say, the cup overflows and that money, be it money or equipment, can be utilized in helping other people that don't have. As in scientists, we know scientists, you know, working, they battle. So there I'm very, very happy. And going back to the HopeSpot in Hermanus, it was a great honor working with Dr. Sylvia Earle. Always been an incredible icon in my life from a youngster. And I was very privileged again to be made a champion. So I was closely alongside her, and unfortunately the weather didn't play out on the day that we wanted to get the plaque down in Hermanus, which is still there. I think it's time to get back down there and give it a good scrub, because I'm sure it's been covered over with algae, but it is still there. And I think we need to get a picture of that and bring that out again, to show people in Hermanus that the Hope Spot is alive and well. The Hope Spot, I have tried to keep my little part going. And yes, Taryn, if you can just help me with the photographs, I'd like to just share some of them with you. I started what we call Plastic Patrol. Plastic Patrol, Taryn, we can go, if you don't mind, to the first picture. There we have it up there. I started Plastic Patrol because we have a huge problem in our harbour, as I'm sure in many harbours, especially in the summer months with the wind, but big storms like yesterday and the day before. I was down there yesterday, and if you can just move on to the diving ones there, Taryn. You can see the amount of plastics that come into our harbour. That get caught in these massive, I call them nets of kelp, which obviously is a good thing because it brings all that plastic into the harbour. But you literally have to get that out on an ongoing basis. When it's there, you've got to get in that water and you've got to get it out, because you'll go back down the next day and it's gone. As quickly as it came in, it's gone, and it's just moved to another area. And that brings me to the full circle that I want to talk about, and where we need as a Hope Spot to be seen again in Hermanus and all the other areas, because it's not only the harbour that needs to be taken care of, but we're a group, Plastic Patrol, we'll look after that because we're in that area every day. We're working with our boats and things. But we need to then pass the flag on. We need to take that flag and pass it on to the guys just down the road in the old harbour, and get a community there that will first of all understand what the Hope Spot's about and take that flag and hoist it. And then those people need to go down to Grotto and then still more people down there. So every base is covered. And I think when Dr. Sylvia Earle was here, I think that was her whole purpose. Handing over, let's say, a flag, hoist that flag, but pass that flag on, encourage people. And so on that spot, I'd also like to suggest very strongly that we, and I'm sure it is on the cards, because Pierre has brought it up, Liesel's brought it up, Dr. Webb definitely brought it up, and thank you for that. Passing it on and letting people understand what the Hope Spot is. A lot of people, I'll say the Hope Spot, and I'll say, what's the Hope Spot? So obviously we did mention COVID, but that's all gone now, and it's time to rise that flag up again, let people know what it's about. And through that will be through the youth, definitely through the youth, dive training, encourage, maritime careers, and get these people involved. So on that point, yeah.
Thank you, Kim. I think, yes, I mean, you've already shared your insights, as a business person, and I mean, your passion for the topic, is obviously evident. I mean, it almost shines through as, virtually, and then the images you show, of the projects, I mean, specifically your Plastics Patrol project and the initiative, I mean, obviously so necessary, bringing youth into the space, and, the kind of awareness these things create at community level, and again, just kind of very practically solving, obviously, our situation with plastics. I think there's been some wonderful insights already, and I do want to kind of start broadening the view, or rather maybe our horizon, and I'd like to welcome some responses from Dr. Rajan Chedambat. You are in Kochi municipality in India, and I mean, I think yours obviously is a kind of somewhat different experience, being more at the local subnational government perspective. How do you interpret, or rather expect, that cities and local governments could potentially optimize, similar partnerships. I mean, really public-private partnerships to improve biodiversity management.
Thank you, Ursula. It's evening over here, so good evening to all. And your question, I would certainly begin with introducing this whole concept of corporate social responsibility funds. That's available in the Indian context now. All these big companies who make profits, 2% of their profit will have to be shared for social responsibility, and we can certainly avail that kind of funding for all our sustainable development projects and programs. And then we'll have to also involve these corporates, and we'll have to ensure greater involvement with these corporates through BOT, that build, operate, and transfer mode. And then we also have to have greater interaction between city governments like ours and community and corporates. It does happen in other fields, but not more on biodiversity and biodiversity conservation and very core environmental projects. It doesn't really happen in South Asian context much. So we have to have this interaction, greater interaction between this local government and corporates. And of course, community is part of that interaction. It has to be the part of the interaction. And then with the support of national and state governments, we go to really introduce legislation and modification legislation to promote the PPP, public-private partnership in biodiversity conservation. And that's very important. I think like a lot of legislation has to happen both in the national government, in the state government, in urban local government like ours for bringing in public-private partnership in biodiversity conservation and larger environmental projects. It's very important in South Asian and especially in the Indian context, where we face serious challenges because India is one of the fastest growing. A lot of construction is happening, like West construction almost almost came to a kind of standstill or like saturation point, but it's happening a lot in the Indian context, and biodiversity is the biggest kind of casualty in that aspect. So we really need to kind of bring in a lot of legislation to get a lot of public-private partnership in conserving our biodiversity for posterity. Yeah, absolutely.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much for sharing that perspective. And I mean, I think that's always so useful because I know we now, I mean, yes, Hope Spots, it's a global project. And, we've been kind of seeing quite a very African type of focus, and to obviously hear out from your experiences, I think that's very much food for thought, also for the work that I guess we're also doing. And I think that might just serve to introduce some of that work. I mean, the project we are working on, is a Global South project. And it is about it's integrated action for biodiversity. And I mean, and that's why it's a privilege to be working obviously with the likes of yourselves and our colleagues in the regional office in India, and obviously also in China, Colombia, and Brazil as well, in the support of actually protecting biodiversity in these tremendously rich biodiverse countries. I mean, the project itself, if we're looking at the participating countries, the biodiversity, it's astounding. And then how important the responsibilities are, that local and regional governments really have. Especially if we look at the, GBF's targets. I mean, how do we make those a reality to say that, the global biodiversity framework recently adopted in December at their most recent COP can become a reality, a reality for local communities. And I think, what I've heard already, is public-private partnerships could be an avenue to do that, to see how can we not just write legislation that kind of, supports biodiversity, but how can we actually really garner action from on the ground? I think that's been super insightful, but I'm also quite keen to kind of circle back to you, Pierre, and just really hear, you know, you've shared quite a lot in terms of also your presentation, and you've in the part maybe answered this question, but is there anything that specifically highlights or kind of, you know, like stood out for you, or specifically around how to incubate or drive marine conservation, and I mean also coupled with social development? Do you think the main mechanism for that is through the case studies and kind of bringing theory to practice, or is there something else that's still, you know, part of that kind of equation?
I think, number one, case studies are really important, because if I had to sell career pathing to a Cape Nature or the provincial government or national government, and I did, it's a concept, and everyone says, but there's a career. You join as a field ranger and you work your way up. But there isn't the specific courses to prepare that young person to be a good field ranger. It's just a field ranger. And then if they happen to be in a situation with a bad manager, or excuse me, in a situation where they're not exposed to much, they're going to stay a field ranger the rest of their lives. So the big thing is a case study like we've done at Claremont, where you test all the different ideas of a career path and how to prepare people. You identify what you feel is an ideal human being, or an ideal human being and an ideal position as a marine field ranger. You test it where the government won't go, NGOs go, so they're always out there. That's what your role is. I'm saying that with tongue in cheek, but you go out there and we develop it together. Then that case study comes back into government, and it goes into a job description or a whatever. And the proof is out there, because there are young people now that have got the qualification, and it's allowed them to get a good job. And once that goes through, government starts biting on it. It's just the way it is. Government's a big machine. That's one way. The other way, no, that is one way, but the one of the core philosophies, or what keeps a Hope Spot going, is the passion of the people like him and others, and they share the message. So we as a team need to work on good, well thought through messages based on good science, or good, and when I say science, social science, natural science, whatever, make sure the product is good, and then the private sector and the business sector will implement it for us. That is, a lot of people say that I influence processes, because say Cape Nature at the moment, we don't have a lot of, or government, sorry, not Cape Nature, but government doesn't have a lot of funding available. So I can influence NGOs to help us rehabilitate birds in a way that benefits Cape Nature. So we set up that partnership. For instance, I'm giving you an example. So this platform helps scientists, government people, and the private sector, because they influence government, but we can all influence each other in a way that produces a final product or platform that's meaningful for everyone. A lot of the community people came to the meetings, and that's what drove me so hard to set up those case studies on the career path and the job creation. Was standard words were wonderful, lovely lovely pictures and photos, but how's it going to change my life? So as a manager of a Hope Spot, you need to take it, or management team, like I say, it's not one person, it's always a team, but you have to take answering the questions from either it's a private sector or government, or the communities. They are the private sector, but I'm talking people that don't have work and depend on the fish that aren't there for a living. Take their questions and comments and needs very seriously, because if your Hope Spot doesn't deal with it or address it in some way, you're not giving anyone hope. And if you're not giving anyone hope, well, then it's just another tick box exercise. And I don't think any of us have time anymore to participate in the tick box exercise. It must be meaningful. So yeah, the team must be very serious. And if you don't, you need to achieve and work really hard at achieving the project. You can't change the whole world. I think in Stacey's presentation, she said, you can't change everything, so start somewhere. That's also a principle that we have to work on. We can't clean the whole coast, but we can start in the harbor and do it well and show that how it works. And then the old harbor might start, etc. So that is also something we, and then what we did also talk about is setting up a tourism venture or market it as, you know, birders have to see all the different bird species. We can have a Hope Spot safari, South African safari or a global safari, so that the Hope Spot themselves become something that people need to visit from all over the world, and that generates economy, and it's an additional economic incentive for the area. But yeah, I think passion, case studies are important to sell it, and then they can become standard operating procedures going forward. In a nutshell.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Pierre. I mean, I think, yes, you've just, and I mean, what you've also just kind of touched on is the way forward, you know, and I think that for me, you know, was almost the next question I was going to ask, you know, to all of you really, you know, what are the new visions that are needed to kind of revive and sustain, you know, the Hope Spot concept, for one? I mean, I know, you know, in Kochi's example, you know, you might not have a Hope Spot yet, but I have no doubt that you might have similar projects, you know, that need a similar kind of revival, you know, something that might have been initiated, that might have worked well, you know, to get the community on board, to support the biodiversity. But if it doesn't have that champion, you know, obviously sometimes things just fizzle away. And what is it going to take to kind of revive these visions? Because essentially, you know, biodiversity management, if it's coastal or terrestrial, you know, they need continuity. And what is it going to take to get those? So, I mean, really a question to anybody. You're welcome to respond.
Can I respond there, if I may?
Yeah, absolutely.
Please excuse me if I read this, but it actually comes out of a document that was put together by Pierre and Liesel and the likes of Taryn and others. And I think it pretty much sums this up, if I could just read this and then just add to it. But I think it is it's of vital importance that the Hope Spot initiate and strive to achieve three main goals. The one would be creating an understanding of our dependence on a healthy environment. And that goes largely starting with youth, because they're going to be our new future. And yes, again, with particular emphasis on the empowerment and mentorship of local youth. And that will be to establish a lasting network of educated, informed ambassadors for our coastal environment. Number two would be identifying and supporting entrepreneurship, development opportunities to help create sustainable livelihoods for local people, our locals, generating a very clear conservation and caring ethos, such that all participants can contribute towards their own future. So once again, it would be for us to instill in the youth and people out there, like I have up there, youth diving into maritime careers. We've got to take these guys underwater with a mask and show them, and that will give them excitement, and along with the education. And then just lastly, going forward, I think for us in Amanis, a good start would be to get a good committee together, a committee that meets regularly and keeps that wheel turning, and create more Hope Spot stations. hand over flags to different companies. You would be Hope Spot Station 2. Please accept this flag and make something from your business. Throw it in there to creating that Hope Spot Station 2 and 3 and 4 till we get to 30 in our area. And that is just, yeah, suggestion.
I think a great suggestion, a wonderful, wonderful, great suggestion. And I saw also Stacey's hand shoot up, but I also got the feeling maybe you wanted to say something, Dr. Rajan, but I mean, over to Stacey first, and then we can come back to you afterwards. So Stacey, your take on what is it going to take for us to kind of go forward from here?
I completely agree with Kim. Sorry, my voice is going. Definitely, there needs to be some sort of sustainability built in. I mean, passion started these things. Passion will get them going, but we all suffer from conservation fatigue at some point, and we all go through these dips in our own passion. And we found in Algarve, the committee helps with that, because when one person is struggling, others motivate you to keep going. And there's that handing of the flag over. So our committee chairs, Dr. Gary Kukamur, who is on the WESA board, and he's a WESA member. And over time, that flag gets passed on to the next person to wave. And definitely that has built in an essence of sustainability, because we can't rely on one person's passion forever. It does run out. Conservation fatigue is very real.
I think you've just touched on such an important point, you know, and this whole thinking that, or not thinking, just that nobody's really going. I think we started the sessions in a similar vein. I mean, you're not going to do it alone, you know, and I love to hear what, you know, the reflection that Kim's suggestion, you know, you can say a committee is what kept you going, because I mean, having to kind of just carry this flag on your own wouldn't have resulted in kind of the current outcomes that you have. I see the hand with Liesel, and I'll come to you just now. I just want to alert everybody in terms of who's joined us, that we have a chat box available for you to pop some questions, and Christine will be getting into Q&A session, and we'll be able to respond to some of the questions that are in there. Otherwise, you're also welcome just to raise your hand if you have a question. And I've also seen another introduction of our kind of final speakers also in there, but I mean, please feel free, add a question into the chat, or otherwise just raise your hand. But I think Liesel, was it Liesel or Pierre to want to also contribute to the current question?
Yeah, it was me. What I think in the South African, maybe not Algarve, because that sounds like that's going along fine. But for the other ones, I really believe another launch is critical just to get us back online. And I 100% support Kim. We need to set up a functional committee again to drive the process. That's essential. We sort of in our own way have been carrying the process along, but it needs to be formalized. I agree with that. And with all Hope Spots, there needs to be a formal group. And I think, yes, like Stacey says, when someone gets tired, someone else steps up, because that's essential. Because in this world, or in this kind of program, you do get a little tired every now and again. So it's good to have that. So launch and a committee, I think, is essential. And then, if you know, we're in what Kim read there about entrepreneurial skill development, or identifying entrepreneurs, as part of the process, we did identify a couple of wonderful people. Over the years, they've now moved on. I'm talking young community people. So that if there is a process to do that, and we want to train and develop a small company for the people, etc., so they can participate, there's always a need for funding. So I know it's probably a terrible word to hear, but in this bigger global picture, if there is funding available for specific projects within each of the Hope Spots, I think that would help as well. Because I mean, you've just heard Kim spending her overflowing cup on the process. And there were a lot of other people that did the same. But once we start kicking into a project, it's quite a lot of overflow. So, and over a sustainable period. So it would be good if we could have, excuse me, as part of this process, maybe a place where funding proposals can be submitted. That would be nice. Thank you.
Thanks, Pierre. Yes, I think some great insights there. Well, suggestions also. I mean, I think some suggestions. I mean, and the employment aspect, which you touched on, you know, kind of wanted me to circle back to Dr. Rajan. I mean, in your responsibility, you know, in terms of obviously cultural heritage or heritage development, you know, and the environmental aspect of it. You know, how, I mean, employment naturally also kind of sits within that context. How have you managed to kind of balance these areas in the work, in your experience in Kochi specifically? You still on mute, sorry.
Sorry, yeah. Actually, it's very important that like we involve our community in the whole process. Like hotspots are like not very much in vogue over here in Kochi. That concept is just introduced us, but like we work a lot on like biodiversity conservation, environmental conservation, protection. But then community involvement is very crucial in the sense like there is still this everyone goes for development. And the moment they feel that environment is hampering their aspiration for development, you are done. So you got to really involve the community in every work related to biodiversity or heritage conservation or environmental conservation. And as I said initially, like legislative support is very important, and it's very much important at the local level. Maybe we have national policies and we have state regional policies on conservation, but we really need like local specific policies. For instance, natural heritage. When it comes to natural heritage, Kochi is on the Vembanad Lake. That is the second biggest Ramsar site in India, and it needs to be conserved. And we really need a very local specific legislation for that. And then urban local governments, it's very important to kind of build the capacity of the members of the local government, like, you know, just the policymakers, the councillors, and the officials as well as. And these aspects of governance is very key for sustenance and expansion of the natural management system or biodiversity management or sustainable development management system in our given space or context. And enterprise-based community-owned models. We will have to develop that kind of community-owned models, very entrepreneur-based community models, and we have to sustain that. We go to promote that kind of models. Like we'll have to really work on such models, and with the support of like now I've seen a lot of models all across, and everyone is very passionate about it. I think we got to really develop such models, and we got to introduce that to our society, and we got to really promote that with the support of community. That's what I go to I have to say over here. Yeah.
Great, thank you very much for those insights. And I mean, it's highlighted, you know, with everybody, community, and we've already been speaking about it quite a bit, youth. I mean, we're not going to, you know, be going anywhere without youth. And I think maybe this is also a good opportunity to now start introducing our youths in your ocean colleagues. And I love the fact that if you've seen them, you know, they've got their YIYO little abbreviations, and there to support today Zinya Bunyula, who's the director with youth, hang on, just let me get it, director of projects in South Africa specifically. I'd like to kind of allow you to take the floor to really say, well, where do we go to from here? And I mean, really to kind of see it from the youth's perspective. I'd like to hand over to you, Xenia, and then maybe we can take some questions towards the end if there are some.
Thank you so much, Ursula and your team, for firstly inviting us to this amazing initiative. Good day, colleagues. I've just listened to some really amazing inputs, and most of them really involving the involvement of the youth. So I do have a PowerPoint presentation that I'd like to share. Mongiwe did confirm that I could able to share my end. So if you could just give me 1 second and I'll just share my screen, please. I do want to also highlight that our director or founder of YIO, otherwise known as Youth in Your Oceans, is also joining in the call. And he will be jumping in here and there for some of the questions. But mine is to really just introduce this incredible initiative that I've really come to believe in. So you can just let me know, Ursula, on your end, or Bongiwe, if you can see the presentation.
Yes, it's come up, but I think if you can navigate to on screen or slideshow, I think, yes.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Okay, perfect. So as Ursula has mentioned, my name is Xenia Bunyola. I'm acting in the capacity of Director of Projects within Youth in Your Oceans, otherwise known as YIO. We are really excited to join this incredible festival. So our input in terms of how we reimagine hope spots within the new vision for community action and urban, or rather urban change in coastal cities, contributes more on the attitudes that we're shaping up, specifically within the youth. So my presentation will first, of course, touch on who we are, what we're about, the kind of objectives that we have, and of course, how we're contributing to this current motion for this panel session. So about YIO, Youth in Our Oceans, or rather in Your Oceans, emerged out of a pursuit to inspire and support a community which desires, or rather desires, excuse me, I'm not wearing my glasses. Okay, here we go. So what we essentially lean more on is maritime specialist consultancy and youth development. And you'll see at the bottom, we have our incredible team, Rachel, Osi, Ati, myself, and Atabile. It's not only us, but we also have another incredible young people around Africa who also contribute significantly in some of the research and development projects that are happening in the background. So our founder and our main director is Mr. Osipesona Nanga, who's also joining the call. And the main agenda that we are trying to push here is really pushing towards youth advocacy and visibility within our oceans. So a bit of a background about myself. I have a background in maritime education and training, which I studied a Master of Science on in Malmö in Sweden, where they have the World Maritime University. And the main purpose as a young person that I wanted to specifically push in specializing in maritime education and training was in the pursuit of capacitating our young people within an emerging economy, which is the blue economy. And when we started reimagining, just to quickly touch on the motion as well, our hope spots, we want our hotspots to be equipped with knowledgeable individuals that are going to also equip other knowledgeable individuals, because the main thing that we are essentially pushing is sustainability in terms of not only knowledge, but in how we make use and interact with the coastal environment as well. So in terms of our objectives, as I mentioned earlier on, we look and focus on educating the youth, capacity building and empowerment. So this is where we sort of shape the attitude, because we have a lot of amazing coastal cities. And I remember this other time a few years ago, before I left for Europe, my hometown is in Port Elizabeth, right? And when you start interacting with young people and you tell them about what maritime is, and they have no idea what it is, but they live in a coastal city, for me, that became personally a big problem. So around that time, I had started engaging with a lot of like organizations on how can we really increase, how can we explore increasing awareness about what maritime is, what ocean sciences is, what conservation looks like outside the curriculum offered in higher education and training. So that didn't exactly materialize, but I became so grateful when I finally met Mr. Ozzy, who's the founder of EO, who started engaging me on exactly that same issue I had a few years back. And when I found out this amazing initiative and about this amazing initiative and what they've been up to in terms of establishing, collaborations. I mean, he's, for example, he's been all over in terms of going to Canada and solidifying these collaborations and stakeholder engagements and drawing in and attracting partnerships. Because the main thing when we are pushing the agenda of capacity building, it requires resources, and those resources need to be funded. So our main conversation here that we also trying to introduce is the importance of us understanding as young people that we cannot achieve whatever we want to establish alone. We also need other organizations that we are going to lean on, not only for resources, but also for knowledge and exchange of ideas, because within whatever vision any organization has, you need to also keep in mind and take account of the next generation and how you want to innovate yourself and evolve as an organization to be relevant in the near future, essentially. So another objective of ours is to identify some of the opportunities that are out there for the youth, and this I'll expand more on a later slide. And we want to contribute to the advancement and protection of the environment and improving the livelihoods of those that depend on it. Now, in terms of Youth of Your Oceans, if you go a little bit deeper about who we are and what we are essentially doing within the oceans economy context, we are highlighting the importance of Indigenous knowledge in informing partnerships within impoverished coastal communities. We are continuing to push towards youth advocacy through various initiatives such as this one that we are part of today, and increase the consciousness of the importance of ocean protection and, of course, the impact of resource support, which I highlighted earlier, that in as much as we can have so many discussions about ocean economy, maritime education, STCW, all these bills, all these international bills and how they are being implemented. When there aren't any plans in place that are partnered and are married to resources that are allocated to them, we cannot unfortunately go anywhere. And that is why we feel it's so crucial that as a hotspot within a coastal community, it's important that we start on our end as young people, establishing these relationships with already existing organizations and learn the best lessons from them, and to see how we can fit ourselves in their vision, perhaps if we are in alignment, and of course how they can fit themselves into our vision, should we all also be in alignment as well. So just to contribute now on the main motion of this panel discussion, which is the new vision for community action. And let's zoom into EO being now the hope spot, specifically within the coastal communities. I'll now make a case study or highlight a case study specifically within the East London region and the Gqeberha region, currently for this case. So I mentioned earlier the importance of us shaping the attitudes of young people on how they respond to maritime and ocean sciences, most importantly, how they interact with this type of environment. And one of the key elements for us is education, right? So capacitating the youth. So your question might be, how do we get this done? And EO is your answer. because I looked at you can look at the portfolios. We'll share our website link. You can look at the portfolios and you see there's incredible talent, right? That we have within the team that has a diverse pool of expertise, not only academically, but by experience. And what we're trying to do here is to, from the knowledge that we've received and experience that we have, to share it. And to expand on that, to really establish a level of knowledge within young people, not only within these regions I mentioned. Case studies, but also in South Africa as a whole. They're setting the youth and we are giving them the skills that they need. But what is the next, right? So you've given the person the skill. They're now able to fish. You've taught them how to fish. They're now able to fish, for example. They're now able to swim. Where do you place them? So that has been the main challenge. I'll make an example. So there were 5 of us that were nominated in 2022 to go study a Master of Science in Malmö in Sweden. And this was funded by government in South Africa, right? And this is an incredible opportunity for us to get educated and get this degree. But the main issue that we had, and this is something that I also put as a challenge to our funder, was when we come back, what happens? What is the next step? We have the skill, I have the degree, but what is the next? Where do you want to place us? So this became a bit of a challenge to kind of like respond, to get a clear response on their end, because this is still an emerging economy. So in terms of placement, it'll always be a challenge, not always, but like currently within the current status quo, it is a current challenge. So I might put also this as a plea to the current panel for you to maybe engage us also on how we can start challenging the status quo, where we can establish a system that is able to absorb the capacitated individuals, the capacitated youth, right? I do recall on some of our discussions earlier that there are initiatives where I think it was one of the panel members that highlighted that they're teaching young people how to swim and so on, and that is an incredible initiative. But the issue always comes on if you capacitate 100 individuals, and where do you place them also? What is the end goal essentially? And the biggest thing, or the biggest answer that I think I can come up with, is always collaboration, right? Because one organization can create the capacity and teach and educate and train. Another organization can place. Another organization can monitor how are these individuals doing. And another can perhaps create an internationalization platform for them to go abroad again and gain more skills and interact with other individuals. So I'll just be quick, just for the sake of time as well, just to complete the next point. So another point here in terms of shaping attitudes is understanding the vision. What are we trying to exactly achieve, and how do we prioritize this? Most importantly, I think this is a lesson that we ended up learning through, unfortunately, COVID, fortunately or unfortunately through COVID, building resilience, right? Especially within the challenges that come within emerging economies. I'm currently pursuing my PhD in higher education studies, and I'm specifically looking at this case study where we start building resilience and how in the challenges that come with emerging economies, the new economy, and it comes with unfamiliar challenges. How do we establish young people, for example, that are able to be resilient? So this is a lesson that one of the lessons that I learned, something called a hidden curriculum. So this is something that is of a hope as well, that we all have it in us to have resilience, but it also depends on our responses at the end of the day. You can say that you're flexible, but it needs to align to the context in that specific point. So it reverts back to the vision, understanding the why, and most importantly, who is on board. Concluding at this point to say it is so crucial for us to start establishing sustainable partnerships. And that's essentially why we're here as YEO, to really build and extend our hand and say that here we are young people, talented, and we are ready to push towards establishing solid partnerships that are meaningful and that can truly, truly contribute to this new vision of a community of action. And YEO is one of those hotspots that understand that we cannot do this alone. We are young people, yes, talented, yes, but we still need that guidance, and we still need that partnerships, and we still need that support in terms of really expanding this vision to not only push towards achieving this goal as a nation, but also achieving it globally and aligned to not only the global conversations such as sustainable development and the COP 2026, but also how we think about the next. So I think that is it on my end, colleagues. I'm really cognizant of time. If there are any questions, you're most welcome to ask us. I will ask Mr. Ossi to jump in on some of them, but thank you very much for this opportunity. We greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senior. I mean, I think you've just highlighted such relevant points, you know, the inclusion, you know, and obviously collaboration aspects. You know, it's really what this whole kind of session is about, and how we actually go forward. You know, for me, I think is, you know, it's an important topic. I mean, I personally see a big alignment, you know, through or potential collaboration through everybody's work. And, you know, that would, I would love to somehow see that happen. But I'm seeing a hand also again with maybe Pierre, was it Liesel? And then I just want to kind of go back to our audience to see if we might have some other questions then. Is it Pierre?
Yeah, just a comment, and maybe it's part of the solution. I specifically mentioned at the Hope Spot, we got to listen to the challenges of the people, and in this case, the youth. And many of them were saying we get educated, but when we go to apply for a job, we don't have experience. So when I spoke about the case study and Nelson Mandela University, there was a very specific reason why we chose that university. They do off-campus modules where the lecturers come to you, which was a seller straight away for us. And we did a week's lectures, so it's a module. And then we did 3 weeks where we trained the young people up in monitoring, doing coastal monitoring, etc., etc. So by the time they finished 3 years, they had their certification, and they had 3 years experience. So when they applied, they're already ahead of everyone else who applies straight out of varsity, because they've got 3 years practical experience. And it was seriously practical. They learned a lot. So it might not be the answer to this specific question of the way forward, but it's definitely one of the solutions. Is we got to design how we our education systems to maximize the time spent for these young people in a 3-year period, that they get educated, but they also get the experience. So it's up to us to design the package that we put them through. Otherwise, we say we're clever and we're going to put you in through varsity, but then you don't have a job because you don't have experience. Yeah, just that's just a comment.
Thank you very much for a very, very insightful comment. And I mean, I think you've just spoken about design again. You know, it is up to us. And, you know, for youth to actually have opportunities, you know, the capacitated youth to have an entry point, you know, this experience conundrum is quite an age-old one. And it's an innovative approach that you have. And I mean, maybe the biodiversity economy can have, you know, really kind of elements of this in terms of the programs it develops. Maybe there's an opportunity to kind of collaborate with local and subnational governments to kind of bring in these types of green type of experiences for youth, maybe either linked to a formal qualification, or just maybe through a program that can actually spark awareness. Now, I think this is really, you know, the ideas that can emanate and to do out of these discussions is really what we like to kind of achieve through this process. And I think we've We've had a number of these ideas kind of bubble up today, and I have a whole 5 minutes left to try and summarize them, but I'm not going to manage every individual's kind of presentation and do that justice. And I think it's just nigh impossible to try and achieve that. But I think in summary, you know, the focus on collaboration, be that from youth through kind of the whole kind of stakeholder grouping, business, government, NGOs, you know, protecting biodiversity or coastal management, development as such is going to require a collective approach. That's only really possible through partnerships, public-private partnerships. And, you know, that brings the agency and the awareness at community level. We have to bring communities into the work we do. Otherwise, you know, there's no point. Otherwise, it's just academia, or it's just government, or it might just be business. But what is all of that if it's not for a shared value of bringing all the stakeholders kind of on board and into the program? I saw a hand shoot up, so Asi, over to you. You can unmute and ask your question, yeah?
Bonjour, mesdames et messieurs.
Bonjour, monsieur.
Je m'appelle aussi, comment allez-vous?
Ça va bien, ça va bien. Bienvenue.
Très bien, je suis béni. I was just checking, I know a bit of French, I was just checking if the translator's awake. Otherwise, yeah, Ursula, thank you so much for that. You know, Dr. Webb mentioned it explicitly in terms of collaborations. They are extremely important, and partnerships, because you need to have community buy-in. As I mentioned, my name is Ossie from Youth in Your Oceans. I'm one of the director of coastal development. It's crucial, it's important to have the community buy-in. It's one of the things that we actually emphasized in Canada during the COP15 as the youth, that, you know, if you have a phone, right? If you don't feel like that phone, if that phone does not belong to you, you're not going to value it. But then if you conscientize a person that they know that they worked hard for that phone, they're going to be able to value it. So that same goes for the environment. If the community does not feel that they own the environment and the environment is theirs, and they conscientize about the importance of the environment, they're not going to feel a need to protect that environment. So now what we focus on as Youth in Your Oceans is actually educating them, as Xenia mentioned, that the youth here, people don't know about maritime. They don't know about 30 by 30. They don't know about marine protected areas. So people like us who are well educated in the area, we have a mandate in order for us to educate them about the importance of marine biodiversity, or biodiversity as a whole, and protection of the environment. So with that mandate, we try and conscientize them so that you have a pool of youngsters who actually know what they're doing and who actually have a buy-in and actually support organizations like ICLAIR in order to push the mandate forward, and the global biodiversity framework. So partnerships and collaborations are key, and we need organizations like ICLAIR to actually partner with us in order to drive the mandate forward. Thank you so much, Ursula. God bless everyone.
Thank you very, very much. I mean, yes, partnerships is really, I think, what is being summarized. But if we're looking at the way forward, partnerships is definitely one way, because we need each other to kind of, you know, as we heard, carry the flags and pass on the flags. But funding and, you know, kind of, you know, goodwill is one thing, and passion, it goes a long way, but access to finance is also an important one. And I think with that, I also want to make a reference to, it is one of the sessions that's actually happening or was held in parallel to this one. I want to remind you that all of our sessions will be available to view on demand through the website. So you'll be able to access that and still have a look at that session after this one. And then there's also, we've also got our program in our chat box, because there are still more sessions coming up this afternoon, and I'd encourage you to join some of those. There's also the wrap up this evening, which I have no doubt is going to be very, very informative, wrapping up 3 really exciting days that we've, you know, spent sharing, learning, hearing from each other, And I personally have jotted down many kind of points. The team I work with has already seen some of them in our groups, and you have definitely sparked some great innovative ideas with me. And I very much hope to make these a reality. And who knows, maybe next year we can present collectively on successful stories that were sparked at today's RISE session. But with that, I'd like to thank every single one of you, and maybe just ask if there's anybody who'd like to venture a last closing remark before I close the session. No. Some shaking heads and a thank you, but I think the thank you is really to each and every one of you, our esteemed speakers, Liesel, Pierre, Stacey, Zinia, Kim, Dr. Ranja had to already hop off, and obviously our technical team. This session wouldn't have been the success it was without you, Bongiwe specifically, but the whole team collectively, and also obviously to the team at Youth in Your Oceans. Keep up the good work. It's been a tremendous session. Thank you very much, and I wish you all a wonderful afternoon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.